Hi, I'm Deborah Rosati, founder and CEO of Women Get On Board. And this is Women Get On Board in Conversation. Our goal with these video series is to empower women on their journey to corporate boards. And we have the great fortune of having experts to help our members, to help our Women Get On Board community to gain confidence and courage to lead and serve on corporate boards. Today, I am pleased to be speaking with Andrea Plotnick, the president of AP Board and Executive Solutions. Andrea's here and will speak to us about the importance of serving or aspiring board leaders on how they can elevate their board impact. Andrea, thank you for joining us today.
My complete pleasure, Deborah, to be with you on this journey.
Thank you. So maybe we can get started in our interview today, Andrea, as maybe tell us a little bit about your background and what inspired you to develop a framework for elevating your board impact.
Great, I would be delighted to. So I'm an organizational psychologist by training, and I am a consultant by career choice. And I've been working in the leadership space for 30 plus years now. And for the last 15 years, I've been focused on, I call it the apex of organizations. So I work with executives and executive teams and boards of directors and individual directors and really help them achieve their best. And so my inspiration for elevating your board impact really came from two sources. The first is through my consulting work with executives and boards of directors, where I really saw the difference between those who are impactful and effective and those who are less so. And I started to think about, wouldn't it be great if we could actually decode some of those behaviors that really seem to make a difference between those two groups and teach them and teach how to be impactful to people who are less so. The other source of my inspiration really came about 15 plus years ago when I started doing work with boards of directors on effectiveness assessments. And I really became intrigued by the idea of diversity of thought. Now, admittedly, we can look the same on the outside and still have complete diversity of thought. But where I really landed on is, in order to augment diversity of thought at the board table, you really needed to have people from different lived experiences at the board table. So really have those underrepresented groups represented at the board table. But then I took it to the next level and I realized that that's just half the battle. Getting underrepresented groups to the board table is really just half the battle. It's really making sure that they're able to have a voice, that they're able to influence, and they're ultimately able to have an impact. And that's where those two sort of streams of thought really came together and coalesced into my idea of how to elevate your board impact, my model around the 4 C's.
Wow. So this is 15 years in the making.
In a sense,
and
yes.
Then some. And we can see in your passion. So maybe what we'll try to do is unpack what that model is, and you referred to it as the 4 C's. And through that discovery, you can talk about, examples of how board members can make, because this is really focused on the you as a board member and how you can be most effective. So that's the lens in which we're going to discuss it.
Absolutely. I think you hit on a really important point. Clearly, there's a lot of work that boards and board chairs need to do in terms of helping underrepresented groups elevate their impact. But the focus today is really and in the model in general is really on what's within your control, an individual's control.
Yeah. So you've got 4 C's. I know the first one, critic.
You do.
So let's talk about critic and what that means, and then we'll continue down your 4 C model. But let's start with the first.
Terrific. I'm going to just take one step backwards before we get into the C and talk about the model in general. And yes, there are 4 C's, but they're not distinct. They actually overlap in terms of focus. There's a lot of relationship between the 4 C's, and it's a combination of mindsets and behavior sets that I think about when I'm thinking about how you elevate your board impact. So getting to the C, the first, I think it's foundational to everything, it stands for critic, as in your inner critic. And it's that nagging voice that we often have that tends to limit you in terms of acting. And it's closely related to the imposter syndrome, where we have this idea that other people are privy to this knowledge and expertise that we're not, and that we will be revealed and somehow be shown to be stupid. And what the inner critic's role is to actually keep us safe. So it really has an evolutionary background. It was to actually help you adapt to conform to acceptable standards. So in its roots, it actually was quite helpful, but where it becomes problematic is where it becomes overused and it starts to become this barrage of negative messaging that we send to ourselves, negative talk, the ticker tape in our head that stops us from actually acting or deciding or moving forward, and we self-censor.
So, when you think of those attributes, there was the emotional intelligence, and people were talking about it being more of soft skills. And now I'm hearing more that the inner critic in you is more your power skill. And so it's about being powerful in your presence and how you show up. But do you find that being a critic, so there's internal, which you're referring to, but there's also being external on a board and being critiqued. There's this concept of critical mindset, or are you looking at it on two sides that way?
Well, that's a really good point. In this particular I was thinking more internally around what's holding you back from being impactful. So it's it's more of the negative side. But you're absolutely right. In order to be impactful at the board table, you do need to be able to critique and critique in a powerful way. And that really ties into another C, which is around communication. And how do you actually communicate in a powerful way? But I actually wanted to talk for 1 second, if we can, before we talk about communication, is how the inner critic actually works, because it starts to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so if in your head you're thinking, I can't, it quickly becomes, I don't, which means that people aren't seeing you doing anything, which becomes, I can't. And it becomes cyclical. So that's really where I'm coming from an inner critic perspective. And if you try to ground it in, let's take a board meeting. And this is probably very true for a lot of newly minted board members. You're sitting around the board table with a number of seasoned directors, and one of your seasoned colleagues presents something, and your immediate thought is, oh, that doesn't sound quite right. There's something missing. Why haven't they talked about whatever it is that they haven't talked about? Or that sounds a little risky. I wonder if they have addressed whatever it is that you're thinking. What haven't they addressed? But then your inner critic kicks in and says, well, wait a second. Nobody else is bringing up anything. And these are really seasoned directors beside me. So it must be me. I must have missed something. I probably didn't read the board package properly. I probably don't know something. So you say nothing. You have no impact. The board loses out from a potentially diverse perspective. And at the end of the day, the decision may be less than it could have been or flawed because it wasn't considered from multiple angles. And that's really the danger around the inner critic, the self-censoring inner critic. And I just want to be clear, I'm not talking about speaking up every time a thought comes into your head. That's not what this is about. This is about making sure that your inner critic is not inappropriately self-censoring you.
So there's a few little if just a couple, they talk about onboarding, they talk about, how you get up to speed. And there are some techniques that you can do going in. So a lot of boards will do what they call board buddy. They'll buddy you up with a seasoned board member. There's pre-meetings that you can meet with. So if those thoughts are in your mind, did I see it? You have the opportunity to meet in advance and ask those questions too. So to help you build that confidence, there's a lot of ways to build on that critic part, that inner critic part, to gain that confidence.
100%. I do think at the same time, it is a little bit of a deep dive into being aware of when you're having that messaging. And I call it a little bit of the find and replace. So when you start, observe yourself over time. And when you start to see yourself giving yourself those negative messages repeatedly, do the find and replace. I can't becomes I cannot yet, or I can even better. It's really thinking through what kind of advice would you give a friend? Why are we harder on ourselves than we are on anybody else? So absolutely having those sounding boards, having a mentor, thinking about onboarding, giving yourself a safer place to feel more comfortable, all of those will help. And I think it's helpful to have feedback around how you're showing up. Absolutely. And also doing a little bit of that reflection around what's getting in your own way.
So before we go to the next C, it just reminded me of the little analogy of the little engine that kind of going uphill. It's just, I know I can, I know I can, I know I can. Mm-hmm. Is that what we should be having in our inner voice? I know I can, I know I can.
Yeah, I've done it before. I've been in these situations before. I've managed to, do what I need to do. I've got the skill sets. I will figure it out. I deserve my seat at this board table. I'm here for a reason. It's all those self-talk to just like you would do if you were mentoring somebody else. Mentor yourself. Be your own best friend. How about that?
Love it. Love it. So maybe we can continue our conversation on your next C.
Sure. So the next C is credibility, and it's all about building credibility in order to have impact. And credibility is really a function of two key areas. One of them is your expertise, and the other is relationships. So let me start with expertise for a second. Expertise is your track record, your knowledge, your domain expertise, your functional expertise. Are you a deep expert in a particular sector? You've got something to contribute, and to think about it from a board perspective. What is it that you have? What is your secret sauce that makes you valuable to a board? And we call it, your personal value proposition. What is your secret sauce? What makes you unique and powerful and able to contribute at the board table? And if you're feeling like your expertise is not quite where you want it to be yet, what are some things that you can do in order to grow your expertise? So one of the concepts is around learning in, we call it learning in, and it's looking for those opportunities to continue to grow and develop. And so there's a theory that if you are constantly in your comfort zone and your experiences are all the same, you're not learning. In order to be able to learn, you have to be at the edge of your comfort zone, slightly uncomfortable, and that's where the new learning happens. So put up your hand, take courses, look for opportunities, whether it's within your organization or at the board table, where you can take on a responsibility and showcase what you can do. Lean into opportunities that are actually going to take you to the next level. But I also want to point out, there's the expertise, and then there's the relationships. All the expertise in the world will not build you credibility if nobody knows about it, and if you can't be trusted, and if you have no integrity. And so I like to say it's not what you know, which is your expertise, and it's not who you know, it's who knows what you know. And that is the essence of credibility.
That well said. And I'm smiling because I just had a credibility moment in the last few months on a board that I'm on. And we went into a transaction, and I spent time building trust with the chair of the board, trust with my other board members, and they asked if I would chair this special committee. I did not put my hand up to do it, but it was trust, building my repertoire and what I brought to this goal. And it was built over time. It wasn't like, oh, I have credibility, I should be this. It was recognized over time. And I just used that as an example. And yes, it did get me out of my comfort zone. And I was leaning in and learning up at the same time.
Yeah, and I think there's this feeling that the more experience you get, that you never have that imposter syndrome. Not true. You can be, even professionals, even highly accomplished people, when they're working a little bit past their comfort zone, might feel that I don't want people to suddenly see I don't know what I'm talking about, or I don't want to look stupid, or whatever it is. So it's just becoming comfortable with that and having the confidence to persevere, even when you're feeling like that.
I like that. So do you want to go to your next C?
Sure. So the next C is around communication. And I sort of touched on communication a little bit when I said it's not who you know, it's not what you know, it's who knows what you know. So there's a communication component in there, but it's amazing how much we can sabotage ourselves from a communication perspective. Content is important, but everything around delivery is actually even more important than the content. And it's not about wowing people with everything that you know on a particular topic. If you can make a few key points really well, you will be impactful. So when you think about delivery, there are some things that you can do immediately to help from an impact perspective. Get rid of the qualifying statements, the qualifiers. So all the kind ofs, sort ofs, maybe that we use to water down ourselves when we speak, or speaking in a question when we really mean to make a statement that sounds a lot more authoritative than a question. Or, and just I see this all the time, speaking a mile a minute. And usually it's people who are incredibly smart that are doing this, that it just becomes this barrage of words coming at you that people can't digest it. So it's finding that tone and the pace and the pausing to allow people to digest. And again, not trying to wow people with everything that you know on a particular topic. The other thing that I see people doing is the reverse of a funnel. So they'll start off with an idea and then they get really excited and they keep building and building and building. So it becomes like a reverse funnel. And you leave people actually a little seasick. They're trying to follow your logic. The most impactful communications, keep them tight, keep them linear, provide frameworks so that people can follow along. So for example, I'm going to be talking to you today about the 4 C's. The first C I'm talking about is critic. The second C I'm talking about is credibility, and so on, which takes the reader along or the listener along with you while you're communicating. A couple of other points, if I may, around communication that I think are so important is communication is not just about telling. Communication is about engaging. And engaging means listening. And it's a two-way street. So if you're on tell mode and you're just trying to think about saying everything that's on your mind, you will not be impactful because you're not reading the audience, you're not picking up on signals and everything around that. And then the other point I wanted to make around communication, which I find so fascinating, is around body language. So there's a whole body of research around how people are influenced by our body language. So there's some basic things like stand tall, don't have your hands in your pockets, make sure you have eye contact with people, don't gesture wildly, keep your concentrated hand movements, a lot of things like that. But there also is some research around how body language influences ourselves, not others. And so there's a social psychologist, Amy Cuddy, who's done some research around the power pose and the V pose, which is basically this. It's your arms raised in a V overhead in this. And it's been observed in the animal kingdom and with people, including people that have not had sight since birth, that when they feel a sense of accomplishment, they automatically do that V pose. And it's actually, there's been some research around the V pose that it translates into physiological changes. So more testosterone, less stress response. And so if you want to feel impactful and influence your mindset, if you would, I can do it, or I did it before an important meeting, it actually makes you more powerful from a communication perspective. And so don't walk into a meeting doing
Come on, Andrea, you do that all the time. We know that.
I do. I raise my fists in the air, but it's really, try it. I mean, the worst thing that can happen is it does nothing. The best that can happen is it actually makes you feel more powerful and impactful in your communications.
Wonderful. So we're going to go to your last C, and I'm going to follow up and remind our audience that the first C was critic. The second C that Andrea spoke about was credibility. The third C that Andrea just gave us great insights was communication. And your fourth C is connection. So tell us how how one can use connection to be more impactful in the boardroom.
Right. And again, these are all interrelated. So one may resonate more with you, but you really do need all of them to maximize your impact, and they all flow into each other. So connections is all about networking. Good networkers really understand it's about giving. And you talk about this all the time, Deborah, reciprocity. It's about giving as well as getting. And what you don't want to do is build your network right when you're looking for something from your network. Sometimes it's unavoidable because we haven't put the care and feeding into our networks that we should have long before that. But really good networkers really understand that they need to build an ecosystem around them where they can help others and connect others and support others and advise others, and in turn, get the same. So it's that careful nurturing and feeding of a network over time and accumulate people, so to speak, along the way. It's about moving from transactions to actual relationships. And here's just a small example of something that happened to me this week, which really speaks to the power of networks. I was having some issues with bookkeeping, something I absolutely can't stand doing and had to do. So I called up a colleague, an ex-colleague of mine who does similar work to me, and she wasn't able to help me, but she pointed me in the direction of somebody else. And this woman was wonderful and helped me. And at the end of the conversation, it could have just been a transaction, and that would have been that. And I got what I needed. But instead, we started to talk about the work that we did. And lo and behold, we do work that is complementary to each other. And all of a sudden, it moved to a whole other level where we're going to meet up and connect and talk about how we can actually work together and help each other out. That's the power of networking. You never know where it's going to come from. It can come from a relative, it can come from work, but it's always thinking about, who do I know that can help you? Who do you know that can help me? And how do we work together and build that ecosystem?
So one thing, and Andrea, you've heard me say this on connection. I work with a lot of women leaders, and we have 3 pillars in our mission with Women Get On Board. Connect is the first one, promote is the second pillar, and empower is the third pillar. But on the connection piece, what I have found, those women that are better in networking and connections are, a board opportunity comes to them and they say no, but they say no with purpose. No, I'm not interested because I don't have capacity, but here are 3 other women. And so they're making connection. Not only are they saying no to it, but they're multiplying the network that of sharing others in that network. And I think that connection piece, it's not just about you, it's about how you can help others as well. So I just use that as an example as powerful.
That's absolutely dead on. And it doesn't even have to be that big and broad. In your day-to-day life, as you're reading the newspaper and there's an article that resonates with you, think about who else would benefit from hearing that article. It takes 2 seconds to send off an article to somebody that would be helpful to them. It's having that mindset to take care of others, not because you want something back in return, but just because you're building that system, that ecosystem.
So Andrea, I think our conversations on your 4 C's have been invaluable. What are some key takeaways that you'd like our audience to go away with today?
I would say number 1 is that impact is a competency that can be developed. Some people are naturally more charismatic than others. Absolutely. Some people may be better at networking than others, but that overall idea of elevating your impact, everybody can get better. It requires a little bit of work, but everybody can get better. And if you don't show up, you can't have presence and impact. And what I mean by that is, don't be the person in the room who never says anything. Don't be the person in the room who's invisible and never raises their hand. You have to show up as a starting point. I'd say number 2 is small changes add up. Everything that I'm talking about today around the 4 C's, those are tweaks. There's nothing revolutionary. These aren't mammoth changes. Don't boil the ocean. Start with small behavior changes or mindset changes that will impact together, will elevate your impact. I'd say number 3, and this is so important, good work does not speak for itself. I will pause there because many of us think it does. I will just work so hard, and then somebody, whoever that somebody is going to notice the fabulous work that I do, and they're going to tap me on the shoulder and tell me I'm terrific and create all kinds of opportunities for me. That is a complete fallacy. Again, it's not who you know, it's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's who knows what you know. And that is not dirty word. Those are not dirty words. Get out there and have that personal value proposition at the ready. And then I think I would add on one last maybe parting tidbit that I think is important. It gets back to the dirty language, so to speak. Networking is not a bad word or a set of bad words. It's not manipulative. It's not, we have to sort of erase that from our thought process. It's truly about building an ecosystem of mutual support. And it takes a village. It really takes a village. So focus on how can you lift up others, and others will lift you up at the same time.
Thank you. So, Andrea, with your wise wisdom, how can people find out more about the work you do at AP Board and Executive Solutions?
I'm going to suggest that the easiest way is to reach out to me on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to always connect with others. So it's Andrea Plotnick with a CK at the end. Or you could reach out to me directly via email. It's plotnickandrea@gmail.com, PLOTNICK Andrea@gmail.com. And I look forward to engaging with people and helping people elevate their impact.
Thank you, Andrea. And that's it for the edition of Women Get on Board in Conversation. Andrea, thank you so much for joining us today, sharing your insights with our Women Get on Board community. To find more resources for your board journey, join us at womengetonboard.ca. Love to hear from you. Signing off.